Welcome to this week's Voice for Justice program, sponsored by the General Baptist State Convention of North Carolina. Today's broadcast will be hosted by Reverend Dr. Gregory K. Moss. Our special guest for today's program is the Honorable Chief Justice Cheri Beasley. Chief Justice Beasley is the 29th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina. She was appointed there in 2019 by Governor Roy Cooper. Chief Justice Beasley is the first African-American woman to serve as Chief Justice in our state's history. Chief Justice Beasley is a devoted wife, mother, and committed community citizen. Thank you for joining us today. Let's join in to the program already in progress.
Good morning, everyone, and certainly we thank you for this opportunity. We want to say a very special greeting to Executive Secretary Treasurer Tony Barr for making this interview possible. And I am glad and privileged and honored to be sitting here today via virtual technology with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the great state of North Carolina, Cheri Beasley. And I am Gregory Moss, former president of General Baptist State Convention, and now a happily retired pastor. But I've been asked by Executive Secretary Barr to take on this task, and it is a wonderful one to be able to sit here with Chief Justice Beasley. And we're going to hop right in. I'm going to ask her to greet us in her own way. Good morning to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Moss, and I'm certainly grateful to Executive Secretary Barr for his willingness to let us have this conversation. I am Cheri Beasley. I am the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina. I'm also a member of the First Baptist Church of Raleigh, where the pastor is Reverend Dumas A. Harshaw Jr. My husband and our sons are members there as well, and we also come from the First Baptist Church in Fayetteville, where the Reverend Culbreth is pastor. So we feel very strongly about our ties and roots with the General Baptist State Convention. I'm honored to serve as your Chief Justice. I'm the first African-American woman to serve as Chief Justice for the Supreme Court of North Carolina, and I'm delighted to be here today.
Well, we're delighted that you were able to join us on this particular filming, and certainly we look forward to the conversation going forward. And as you have said, you well established that you are a General Baptist, and a proud one at that.
Amen.
And we are proud of you. I have a question. Could you enlighten those who are listening in about the responsibilities of the Chief Justice, if you don't mind?
Well, the Chief Justice leads the Supreme Court of North Carolina. There are 7 justices on the court, and I'm proud to tell you that we have the most diverse Supreme Court in the nation. There are 3 African Americans, 3 women, and the first Jewish member in 200 years. And the Chief Justice also leads the entire judicial branch of government. There are more than 300 court facilities across the state. And so there are judges and district attorneys and public defenders and clerks of court and court reporters and magistrates and a whole host of folks who make up our entire branch of government. So the Chief Justice leads that arm as well. She also leads and oversees the budget, which is over $500 million, and leads court programs and a host of other things. So it is quite a position. You know that there are 3 branches of government, and the governor leads the executive branch, and the Chief Justice leads the judicial branch.
Okay, could you take a moment and just give the audience an idea of what a typical day in the life of the Chief Justice is like?
Well, you know, in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, probably very few of us are having typical days, but it's been my responsibility as the Chief Justice during this pandemic to make sure that we are keeping people safe who use our courts. I was the first Chief Justice in the nation to enter an order to greatly reduce the cases that we were hearing in our courts because we didn't know the impact of the spread of COVID-19. We know a little bit more now, and so we're increasingly expanding the activities in our courts, but we're still not where we were before the pandemic. So it's the Chief Justice who makes those decisions about what happens in court administration across the state. It's a typical day has been meeting with judges and other court leaders around how best to make those decisions. We have a COVID-19 task force, and I'm proud to have appointed them, and they've served very well. We are really excitedly dealing with racial disparities as we've had a real awakening in our courts around the death of George Floyd. And I'm excited about the fact that we have court leaders who understand the importance of addressing racial and gender disparities in our courts. And so we are moving forward with constructive conversations about how best to deal with that. I'm in the process of forming a commission. This commission will not study disparities. We know that disparities exist. We know that more than half of the people in North Carolina have no trust and confidence in our courts. And so as Chief Justice, and I know my duties are not the traditional kinds of responsibilities of the Chief Justice, but I know it's important for me to do more. We can be better and we must be better. So we are doing better. Have already begun to address racial disparities, and really had been, frankly, before George Floyd died. We'd already been dealing with disparities around bond and outcomes and cases and a whole host of things. But certainly the conversations and the actions have certainly changed and morphed and thankfully improved. And so George Floyd's death is certainly not one that happened in vain. I think it's forced all of us to act progressively around how to do better in our systems.
Okay. I was a part of a listening group. I think the governor appointed a commission, a task force. And one of the things that came out is that rather than tinkering with the existing system, there is a thought that there needs to be radical change in terms of even tearing down to the very bare bones and building back. What say you?
You know, I think there's great value in that premise. I really do. But the other piece of that is the governor's task force is doing great work, and it will last for up to 2 years. We're doing a commission because we know that these efforts have to be long lasting. Rome wasn't built in a day. Racial disparities didn't start yesterday. And we have to really have a reckoning around this nation's history, holistically, but also especially in our courts. We have not been the greatest guardians of the rule of law. It's important to acknowledge that, and it's important to do something about it. So we are excited about the efforts that we're making now, but we know that in order to make full changes and put them in full force and effect, this commission needs to be committed to being in existence for years to come.
Okay. Well, can you talk to us about the Faith and Justice Alliance?
I will. And I'm delighted that you've agreed to be a member of that alliance. We're very excited that over a year ago, I thought about the fact that it would be really awesome to have the faith community come together with lawyers and to really think about how to galvanize to make people who will never be able to afford a lawyer be positioned in a place where they can have legal services at no cost to them. So we're excited about the fact that we've had pastors and other clergy and faith organizations to come on board. A clergy person may recommend a person for legal services, and that person will receive legal services at no cost to them. And it's exciting that lawyers are excited about being able to have their faith and professions converge on their personal beliefs around doing good for others. And who would have ever known that we launched a few weeks ago, formally, although we've been in existence for over a year, that we would be at a place where the intersection of faith and justice and law matter in the way that they do in the wake of the George Floyd killing. So this is a pivotal point. People are suffering through this pandemic. People are greatly challenged in their lives. Folks are dealing with a whole host of financial issues. And so the fact that we've been able to help them through this alliance, through our COVID-19 small business and a nonprofit initiative as well, to also offer pro bono or free legal services to people. I mean, it's important for the court system to be active, not just in court, but to be actively engaged outside of court as well. So to have the faith community embrace and appreciate the fact that our efforts are truly genuine. We know we need to do better, and we need the faith community, and I think the faith community needs us. I'm not sure that when we thought about this, the faith community would have known that it would have been challenged in the way that it has been. So this collaboration, I think, is hugely powerful and has a great potential to do some really powerful things around the state.
Okay, could you drill down a little deeper and give us a concrete example?
Well, we are going to be hosting and already begun to host legal clinics in places of worship. And so many places of worship are gathering virtually now, but we're still able to host these legal clinics, and people are in need. I mean, if somebody is dealing and facing eviction, I mean, homelessness is not the kind of issue that will wait. Families are in great distress around that. So we're excited that we're already beginning to see how this Faith and Justice Alliance and our partners around the state can be engaged in helping people to work through the legal issue of eviction. So, helping somebody find somewhere to live, that's a different kind of way in which faith communities can be engaged. But the legal issue of eviction is imminent. And we're excited about the fact that we've been able to help people through that. We're also hugely excited that that clergy want to be trained to hear and identify legal issues, because often when those problems are presented, they are presented as problems, and people don't identify for themselves that those are legal issues. So the fact that clergy have been willing to take that on and to be actively engaged that way, there's a whole trust factor too. I mean, that the legal community wouldn't be able to have on its own. I mean, the fact that people can go to clergy to say, this is what's happening in my life, and then the clergy person can say, lawyer, hey, we need help with this. It's been an amazing partnership so far, and I'm excited about the growth. So if people would like more information, they can certainly come to you since you're a member of the Alliance, but they can also go to ncfaithandjusticealliance.org.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. One of the things I would like to say, everything access off of relationships. And I think this whole idea of Faith and Alliance, thank you for it, because I think the community is going to benefit greatly from it. And I think it'll go a long way in building that trust factor that many of our people do not have with the court system. So we tip our hats to you for that, and those who work with you. Also, what other kind of programs do you have under your hat right now?
Well, the one thing that we know many things about this pandemic and about how people are being challenged. We know that substance abuse and alcoholism are up. And we need to be less concerned with criminalizing that and thinking about more how to treat people who are suffering from these diseases. So we are excited about the fact that we are looking to increase the number of drug treatment court facilities that we have. Unfortunately, we only have about 23 in the state now, but we need a drug treatment court in every single county in this state. And I'm excited about that prospect. The court leaders are excited about that happening. It's important to hold people accountable on the one hand, but it's also important not to criminalize the disease and the mental health issues around the disease. So we're excited about the fact that court leaders, because that's often the first step too, that we can't be resistant to helping folks. And so I'm excited about that. We're also really excited about the fact that we are improving technology. And we probably didn't really appreciate the importance of that before the pandemic, but we certainly appreciate the importance of it now. It's embarrassing, and the young folks on the virtual call will appreciate the fact that we're still using MS-DOS systems in 2020. And for us old folks, if y'all remember when computers first came out and everything was in green, there was a little caret at the end, you type everything, little caret at the end tells you to start to the next line. We're still using those systems. And so we've just got to do better. In this pandemic, as we've slowed down the access to our courts, so many things that happen in our courts, people don't really physically need to go to the courts to handle. So if we were fully up and running with our e-courts, we would be in a much better place. But I'm excited about the fact that we've been able to hold virtual hearings and some telephonic hearings. And so we are making those kinds of improvements. But I'm excited about the fact that we are going to have e-courts. In our rural communities, it's going to mean a whole lot. Even for folks who aren't accessibly able to access broadband now, the courts are laying the broadband and allowing local governments to hook up to it. So the issues that you hear around school systems not being able to have access to broadband. So you've got a duality there in the functioning of technology. So we're excited about what this means for communities holistically.
So I guess we could say, and from a church perspective also, there are many churches who for years, and being a former pastor, who fought against technology. I mean, tooth and nail when it came time to talk about it, putting it in the budget. You get a lot of questions about it, a lot of opposition, but perhaps that's been one of the positive things about the pandemic. It has forced us to become more creative and more open to things that normally would not have received the kind of consideration that it's receiving now. But I will say it is quite surprising to know that our court system is still on DOS.
It's frightening. I mean, we are the ninth most populous state in the nation with 10 million. And we're still, as we're trying to be a player in the global economy, and folks look at court systems because they want to know how that impacts their businesses. And so it's provincial. But you're right. The bright side is that we are all aware and that the fact that churches are meeting virtually and the fact that we can have the partnership virtually is pretty powerful and helps us to really see how technology is really good for us and not bad for us and worth investing in.
Okay, well, let me push you a little bit. What is the court doing to change that culture?
The culture around us being technologically averse.
Yes. What is it going to take? What is it going to take?
Know, much of it has been and the reality is, most of the judges and other court leaders are, around our age. And so we've all been averse. None of us thought that we could or would or should use technology in the way that we've really been forced to do it. And now that we're all Zooming all day long, we know that there's so much, if you think about just your level of travel, just in the last year, let alone your whole, record of service. When you think about how much you've been able to do without actually physically traveling to California or to other states. So, it's also more efficient in a lot of ways. And so I think and even though this pandemic has been devastating for a lot of families and a lot of communities, I think we have been forced to push ourselves to do better in a host of ways. And I think technology is one of those ways.
Okay, I guess what I was really trying to get at, what will it take for the court? Does it come from the budget from the court, or will it something that the legislature has to deal with?
Our funding does come from the legislature. Thankfully, we have already signed the contract to increase our technology, and the rollout has begun. It was one of the first things that I did when I became the Chief Justice. I didn't know we were going to be in a pandemic, but I did know that technologically we were not in a place where we needed to be. So we've signed the contract. We are hopeful that the legislature will fund it because it is the right thing to do. The technology for the courts is also the same technology that the law enforcement officers, local, state, and federal, use to pull up somebody's record when they're pulled over on the side of the road. So there's a real need and incentive for the legislature to fund this project. It's a public safety issue. It's an issue around courts functioning well, and it's also good business.
Well, we're excited for the court, and good for you. Also, I'd like to add that churches are wrestling with similar things, and I'm sure you would agree that it's going to be a new norm. I was in a conversation yesterday with someone talking about when we get back to the old norm. I said, well, if you're looking for that, you're already behind the eight ball. It's going to be a new norm. So I'm sure it will be that way for the court also. But it can be, some of the older things can be incorporated but I think we're going to have to always think about doing things differently and more creatively. And perhaps this will keep us on the leading edge of things going forward. Thank you
Well,
for
I agree with you. And I also hope that the Faith and Justice Alliance will be an impetus for faith communities and churches to really, I mean, it, you're already doing the work of social justice. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to partner. So many churches, frankly, are having to think about what our livelihoods look like going forward. And so it seems to me that as communities are engaged in social justice just broadly, that is a wonderful way to help churches to also reinvent themselves and to, push Jesus differently. I mean, it's all the same mission of helping other people. And so how we do that, it may look a little differently going forward, but the fact that there are so many segments of our communities and corporations and other entities that are looking for a way to help with social justice, we ought to seize these opportunities also.
Yeah, well, we work real hard to help the clergy around the state to understand that Jesus was the greatest social activist that we have ever seen. And so it's okay for the church to be engaged that way.
Right.
And I'm sure Dr. Barr will find ways for the Alliance to be able to interface with GBSC, as well as other sibling groups around the state to make sure this word gets out and others become engaged with the Faith and Alliance group. And
I'm excited about that.
I'll do my best to help make that come to pass as a
Thank
part
you.
of that group. How about let's move to another subject. Let's talk about something that's sensitive for a lot of people, and that's race. And let's also include gender equality, race, gender equality in the courts. Can you talk to us about that?
We've just not done it well. And it's a difficult thing to say, but it is even more difficult to deny. And I was the first Chief Justice in the nation to acknowledge publicly that we have racial and gender disparities in our courts, that we have to do something about it. I made a public statement about it, and it was featured in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. But it's important. It's important. You can't really have a reckoning unless you acknowledge what's wrong, right? And so it's important for us. You can't move forward. You absolutely cannot move forward if you don't acknowledge the wrongs of the past, and frankly, the wrongs that are currently happening in our courts. And it may not be intentional. I'm not sure that it always is now. I think often judges and other court leaders truly believe they're doing the very best and truly seeking justice. And so some of that may be implicit or inherent, but whatever it is, we've got to acknowledge that it exists and pledge to do something about it and to move to eliminate it. It's not enough to just say it exists and it's just one of those things that happens. We have to be proactive in doing something about it.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about minimum maximum as it relates to sentencing?
Well, it's there was a time, 1994 in North Carolina, we had a whole mandatory sentencing grid. Before that time, sentencing was essentially left up to judges. There would be a maximum sentence, but where the person fell in that range was completely up to the judges. The thinking in the Sentencing Act in 1994 was that judges had way too much discretion, that the sentences were disparate and certainly being applied in disparate ways, and that if Johnny came before the court and was white, there would be one sentencing, and if Johnny came before the court and was black, there would be another kind of sentencing. So that's how we ended up with the mandatory minimums and maximums in the state court system. But there are folks community-minded folks like you, social justice-minded folks like you, and others who are who have no legal background, but who are pressing courts to do things differently, and to not just have the broad discretion that we had before the structured sentencing program, but to have more directed factors around what constitutes mitigation in sentencing, and looking at sentencing, and dealing with the fact that we've got to acknowledge that sentencing has happened disparately in our system. So it's happening in the federal level, that whole reevaluation, as well as in the state level.
Okay, thank you for that. Could you walk us through, many people probably don't know how cases get to the Supreme Court. Help us with that.
Well, some people will say, I got a speeding ticket and I'm mad I wasn't speeding and I'm going to fight this all the way to the Supreme Court of North Carolina. And you really can't do that. Those cases are handled in the district court, and we have district courts all across the state. We have superior courts, which tend to have, the district courts tend to handle the misdemeanor cases. The superior courts tend to handle the felony cases, generally speaking. And then we have the North Carolina Court of Appeals, which is the intermediate level appellate court. It is a court of 15, which sits in panels of 3. So only 3 judges will sit on a particular case, and the cases can be appealed to the Supreme Court of North Carolina. From the Supreme Court of North Carolina, cases can be appealed directly to the Supreme Court of the United States. So it's frankly difficult to appeal to the Supreme Court. Usually, the first appellate court, the Court of Appeals, is the court where most cases, when appealed, end their journey. Okay. But there are direct appeals from the business court to the Supreme Court of North Carolina, and on some constitutional issues from the trial court to the Supreme Court of North Carolina, and on termination of parental rights cases, which are heard in the district court, to the Supreme Court of North Carolina.
So there are very few cases that can come directly to the court from district court. And I'm sure a lot of people are not sure about that. Thanks for the analogy with the traffic ticket. So we'll make sure that Dr. Barr, who gets frequent tickets, he knows that he can't get it before the Supreme Court of the state. Thank you. Let's talk about, we have a very important election coming up. And there's several schools of thought about the Supreme Court. I believe in recent elections, we've now added party to the court, which most average person believes the court's supposed to be impartial, which in my estimation really politicizes it even the more, in the fact that you have to run statewide for the seat. There's some people who feel like they should be appointed. Let's talk about why your race this year is so important and the others, if you don't mind.
Sure. You're right. We are now partisan. This is my 5th election. It's my 3rd statewide election, and it's my first partisan election. My first 4 elections were all nonpartisan. So figuring out how to run a partisan election is just a little different for me this time around, when, as you say, we are nonpartisan. Politics really should not at all enter in our considerations in the judgments that come before the court. We do run statewide, and I certainly speak about this issue across the nation around whether or not judges should be appointed or elected. And the reality is, and I can tell you the outcome of every single Supreme Court race since 1986 all around the nation, because I care that much about it. And the reality is, the states where they have appointment systems really don't have better diversity, which is pretty amazing. And the states that have electoral systems do have better diversity. Now, most systems, North Carolina is very fortunate right now, but most courts are lacking in diversity, and so they can certainly do better. But elections tend to favor, we tend to do better in elections as opposed to appointment systems. But the reality is, I say that, but I want to also be very forthcoming. I was appointed as a district court judge. I was appointed to the Supreme Court of North Carolina, and I was appointed to serve as the Chief Justice. So if you've been appointed, then the appointment system can work. But the reality is it is also a very exclusive system. So I want to be frank about that. And so there are questions about how inclusive that system is. But it's hard to run statewide. It's expensive. I mean, I've got to raise about $3 million, which is just absurd because we know that there will be negative and probably sexist and racist ads coming at me from outside of the state of North Carolina. There are people who are concerned about state Supreme Court races because they know that even though the decisions that the U.S. Supreme Court makes are important for all of us, the decisions that the Supreme Court makes of North Carolina impact your everyday lives, whether you realize it or not. And so they understand the importance of the race and the office of Chief Justice, and so they will be pouring this money in. And General Baptists ought to care. It's important to think about the import of leading a court system. And if we've got concerns about court outcomes, and if we have a Chief Justice who has been courageous in speaking out and courageous in being proactive in making changes, and proactive in appreciating the importance of focusing on faith in our work, we got to know that folks around the nation are taking note of that. And those are the kinds of value systems that are important to us. And so we've got to care about this election and all elections. Because I also want you to know that North Carolina will have the third longest ballot in the nation. So folks are going to come to all of you all who are watching today and ask you why my vote counts. Why does it matter if I participate in this process? And who are all these people on here? Folks will know who the folks are at the top of the ticket, but they won't know the rest of us. And so I am asking you to take the time to know more so that you can help people to understand that really, as folks are protesting across the nation and the state of North Carolina, which and all those voices resoundingly making an outcry about the importance of some really important issues, really have to appreciate that combination of speaking and the power and empowerment in voting is hugely important. We've got to understand the importance of all of that. And I know our former First Lady, Michelle Obama, said that there's so much at stake here, and this election is the most important election of our lives, and it is.
Yeah. Can you say a word about appellate court judges?
You know, appellate court judges, so we have the Court of Appeals and then the Supreme Court of North Carolina. We're all elected, and it's important. You know, most folks have some understanding of what happens at the trial level, but often some of that understanding gets lost for the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court of North Carolina. It is important to know who your Court of Appeals candidates are. Since most appeals are heard at the Court of Appeals level, you have to know that the people who you're deciding in those elections are there to serve you and there to serve you fairly and justly. It's hugely important. The decisions made at the Supreme Court of North Carolina, even though it's about the cases before the court, those cases, which I would say jurisprudentially or as a matter of the rule of law, impact everybody's lives. And so we've got great people running for the Court of Appeals. I think Laura Cubbage is absolutely wonderful. She's a judge on the Superior Court in Guilford County. Reuben Young has been a leader in the state government for a really long time. He is fantastic. And so we've got to make sure that we care about our courts. All of us need your prayers and we need your support. You can certainly go to all of our websites, but these elections are just as important as elections at the top of the ticket.
I've been working with, I work doing community organizing, and right now we're gearing up for the GOTV, Get Out the Vote. And one of the questions has been, there are polls that say that we don't trust the post office. and rightfully so. But one of the things I think is important for General Baptists and those who are listening, that rather than sit back and not get a ballot, we are encouraging people to go ahead and get a ballot. It's better to have one and not need it than to need it and not have it, because you never know what's going on with this COVID time. If we ended up in some type of shutdown, at least you would have it, and you don't have to mail it in. You can take it to the Board of Elections, or you can take it to one of the precincts. So we are purporting that. And I also agree with you wholeheartedly. We are really trying to teach people to go all the way through the ballot to the very end. Mm-hmm. All the way through the ballot to the very end. No longer can you go straight Democrat or straight Republican, but just go through all the ballot, because those elections are, if not more important than the ones who are leading the tickets. So we're excited about this opportunity to do that. And I would also like to put this little shameless plug in. If voting was not so important, then why are so many people trying to suppress the vote, and have been doing for years and years and years? So it is important that we do that. Quick word about faith and family from you.
You know, I'm married to Curtis. We have twin sons who are Matthew and Thomas. They are 19 years old. They're college students and facing much of what the uncertainty that a lot of college students are facing around returning back to college. So, and faith is important. You know, when you are the first this and the first that, and blazing trails, it ain't easy. It really is not. It's taken a lot of hard work, but it has certainly been my faith that I have had to stand on. I've not known anything else to pull me through. I'm certainly thankful that I've also been surrounded by faithful people like you and so many others who believe in the power of the Holy Spirit, but also know that the power of the Holy Spirit moves us to act. That we can ill afford the luxury of sitting back and watching things happen. We must be proactive in what's happening around us. And I'm, you know, I am a child of God. I am a student of the Word. It has truly, truly, truly brought me from a mighty long way.
Last question in two parts. What has been one of your most challenging moments as a Chief Justice, and what has been one of your most successful moments as Chief Justice, in your opinion?
Wow. One of the most challenging moments has probably been greatly reducing, folks say shutting down the courts, but we did greatly reduce. It was a lot of pressure around what to do, what was the right decision. And ultimately, you know, the decision is mine and I take responsibility for it. And it was the right decision. And I was the first in the nation to do it. So there were folks around me who thought that was insane. And thankfully, it's all worked out. And I can't even really say that that's necessarily the decision was challenging, the circumstances around the decision. It pains me that we've had dozens of people in our courts who have contracted COVID-19. We have temporarily closed down dozens of courts across the state. And so the circumstances around making sure that people stay healthy. And I know you said one, but the other challenging piece has been the circumstances around the protests, because people were expressing their hurt, anger, disgust of this state, of this nation, and of our institutions. And so it pained me to see people just hurting. And it was a tipping point, right? I mean, all of that had been building and building and building and building. So, I mean, I cannot absolve myself of that. I'm the Chief Justice on the one hand, but this is my community. These are my people. And so their hurt is my hurt. And so that has been a difficult piece as well. And I would say the most successful part of all this, it really has been my whole tenure. I mean, I've enjoyed it. It's seems to be going really well. But one of the most beautiful things that happened when I became the Chief Justice was that I literally heard from thousands of people from around the world who were so excited that I became the Chief Justice. People I never would have encountered who really sort of accepted my appointment as some small victory for themselves. And that's really what service ought to be about. And this service and this work is not about Cheri Beasley. There certainly is an easier way for me to live my life. But the fact that so many people have taken ownership over this, my tenure and over my appointment, truly means a lot. And I hope it inspires little girls and little boys to know that they really are capable and can do anything they put their minds to.
Well, thank you so very much. And I want to say to you on behalf of the entire General Baptist family, we're very proud of you and proud of the work that you're doing. Your initiatives are really impactful. And you certainly have our prayers along with your colleagues down the line in the court, because you have a tremendous job, but you're already doing a tremendous job. And I also know that there are other General Baptists who are stepping up to the plate and offering themselves for positions around the state. And I hope that we can keep those in mind as we go forward. But know that you can call on us, and we're certainly keeping our eyes on the work that you are doing. And we're in this thing together, as you said earlier. It's a great partnership, and we look forward to strengthening it going forward. Okay. Thank you for your time. Blessings upon your family, and may God continue to bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Moss. Thank you, Dr. Barr. And thank you so much to my General Baptist State Convention church family.
Amen. God bless.